I'd like to welcome everyone to the Thursday, September 19th, 2024 Timoth Planning Commission regular meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and going down our agenda, I would actually like to move up. I'd like to acknowledge Bob Lloyd has resigned from the Planning Commission. He was a member since 1998. He has put a tremendous amount of work into the town plan, the town plans and zoning. He loved making maps. I mean, his maps are what we are going to be using into the future. He was a prolific map maker, and he's moving into a much, much more needs, so he
Yeah.
decided that he can't be a member of the boards anymore. So we would like to just acknowledge him and his years of dedicated service to the town of Timoth and the planning commission. With that, we now are open to approve review the agenda. Any other additions or deletions? I think there's one other thing.
There's one deletion there, the report of the meeting with the select board that actually happened in August. You'll note in your minutes of August.
And so our next order is to approve the minutes of the 8/15/2024 meeting.
I didn't have any concerns with it.
That's good.
I move we approve. I'll second it.
All in favor?
I,
All right. All right, so now let's get down to the meat and potatoes of the meeting tonight. Jeremy.
Hey, everyone.
I dare.
So Jeremy,
Yeah,
go ahead.
so I reviewed your minutes and video of your last meeting, and I think it would be really useful to take a step back in the EEP, Enhanced Energy Plan process, and cover some details. So I think tonight will make sense is to cover some broad concepts to avoid the specifics of the minutia of the plan, and then to create a work plan from there. And so for broad concepts, my takeaway from the minutes and the recording of your last meeting was that there was a level of call it friction about acceptance of the data involved in the plan and the equity, the word equity specifically, and the concepts around that. And so I wanted to go over the standards that are required for the plan as a first step. So within enhanced energy plans, there's a whole bunch of standards, and that's where all the minutia of the data comes from. The plan requires that. So the draft that I provided you, that was a template that I tried to, with all the EPs I work on, I try to make them as short as possible and have as little excess information as possible. So pretty much any data points in there are absolutely required to be in there. If there was concern about not liking the numbers that were used, if the town doesn't want to use the numbers that were in the plan, which in a later conversation, like once we're dealing with the actual specific details of the exact numbers, I'm happy to tell you where all of those numbers came from and show you how those were determined. But if the town doesn't like the numbers from the data that's available, the town would have to come up with reasonable alternatives based on credible data sources. Meaning you can just say, hey, I don't like this number for how much energy we use, so we're just going to use this other number that I'm making up right now. There has to be some kind of researched, credible number to use. So it's not just whimsical.
Well, I think that was part of our questioning was some of the numbers that we were getting, and it sounds like they're, you know, we would like to see where these numbers are coming from. I'm like, first and foremost, like, we would like all of that data that you know, I just, you know, as you're talking, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but, you know, when we're looking at the universal analysis, you know, the people of Timoth currently use approximately 86 14 million BTUs. Like, I would like to know where that number comes from. I honestly would. And if you say that you have that data, if you have that, you know, how that came to be, I think that that's something that we all need to be looking at, you know, us, we need to be looking at that. And if it does in fact end up being that we need to come up with different numbers because we don't necessarily think that these numbers are accurate. I think that that is a conversation that we should be having at some point.
Yep.
Numbers matter. I mean, it's, and, you know, the minutia matters. It's, you know, the broad concepts are, if you put numbers into broad concepts, it's our plan. We need to be saying, we need to be having confidence that these are actually numbers that came up from somewhere, from some source other than someone just typing them in because it sounds good, you
Yep.
know?
I completely agree with you. So yeah, and I think that's a matter of those specific details would be a conversation as part of a work plan of the section we're working on. So I completely support that and agree with it. I think it's a good idea. And then in terms of the broader concept, the other one was the equity piece, and that's a requirement of the plan. It seemed like there was a lot of discussion in the last meeting that there was discomfort with using that term and potentially with the concept in general. And it's standard 10 within the plan. And I would also ask you all here, don't kill the messenger. So I didn't make the standards. I'm just trying to help towns follow the standards. And so within it, the specific standard is to do an equity impact analysis of your policies and actions. And so it's just something you have to do. I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to do that without using the word equity, which was suggested in the last meeting. I think it would be not a good use of time to try to meet a standard that says do an equity impact analysis while also trying to avoid the word equity, because it would not be a clearly
Maybe not use equity so much.
Can you give me the definition, the state's definition of equity right now? We're just off, just so I know that, you know, I can understand what we're talking about.
So there's a bunch of versions of equity, and those were worked into the plan. I would say, once again, the specific details, I think, are less important now. Like, if the Planning Commission says, we're just not going to address an equity impact analysis, then I would say, okay, the moving forward with a plan basically ends right there, because the plan can't be approved if you don't meet all the standards. And so that's the bigger question I have for everyone is, as a broad concept, are you interested in writing an equity impact analysis?
Well, if we can't even define it, how can we write it?
Yeah, I mean, I just asked for a definition. I mean, what is the definition? And give me all of the definitions if we have more than one.
Yeah, so they're in the draft template plan that I provided. There were various versions of equity. There's structural equity. Let me open it and make sure I've got all of them here. And depending on your source, there's a bunch of different definitions. The place I pulled the equity definitions from here were between some VTrans work and the, what was it? I'll have to open the sources again. I don't have them open right now. But I think they're linked here. So we've got there's distributional, procedural, structural, and corrective equity. And those are all versions of the term equity that VTrans uses that I thought were good definitions. Within some other state documents, corrective is not in there, and it's just distributional, procedural, and structural. And so we could go through the definitions as defined in the plan here. Equity wouldn't be like a short one word, this is the definition. It's not like defining the word wallet, where like, yeah, it's a thing you put your money in, license in. And I'm not trying to be avoiding the answer. It's just equity is a concept more than it's a specific, like, easy to define noun, like the word wallet would be an easy to define. So part of the work plan, I think it would make sense, would be to start with that chapter and go through thoroughly all the definitions of equity and all the places they play out through the various state agencies and requirements. But the question still is, as a concept, is that a concept the Planning Commission is willing to take on and authentically address?
Well, it's quiet for a moment. I just want to acknowledge that Melody Squire is on Zoom and so is Jennifer Truple. Jennifer is helping us do the editing and of the other part of the town plan.
As you're reading, I'm going to look up the EP reference for where these definitions can be found additionally, which I believe I emailed maybe 2 months ago, maybe a little while longer ago. I'd have to track that down in the emails I sent to the Planning Commission. See if I can find that.
Just for information, can you define structural equity?
Yes. Making sure I have it. The structural equity is when systems favor more privileged members of a community. So one example would be within energy, a structural inequity would be that incentives, like tax incentives, are designed so that only people who have enough wealth and income to be paying taxes can take advantage of getting the tax rebates and having access to energy rebates or tax incentives rather, for say solar panels. So like if you have enough tax liability, you can get 30% of a tax credit off of the cost of, you get that reimbursed to you if you put solar panels on your home. But if you're low income enough, then you have no tax burden. And so you can't take advantage of that, getting that rebate or tax credit rather. Does that make sense?
Right, so what, I guess,
Yeah.
It has to do with Montpelier making the laws, not us.
I guess, the question I'm asking is, why does a town have to, I mean, equity in unto itself, equalizing, like the distribution of wealth to everyone is, not really a desirable outcome in a society. And so, if you're talking about, letting poor people get a tax benefit to put solar panels on their house, is that, like, how does that benefit the residents of Tinmouth? And remember, like, the Tinmouth Town Plan, and we talked about this at the last meeting, specifically should be orientated towards the residents of Tinmouth. And the overarching goals of the state of Vermont, which, as we are watching in real time, as they are not meeting their projected goals, and we will be in a lawsuit within 2 years because of the state mandated protocols, those do not benefit the residents of Tinmouth, and as a planner for Tinmouth, looking at energy, if we're going to look at energy, we need to be realistic about, what we want to say in here. And I'm not sure that a lot of this stuff, when we talk about, I mean, I read through this whole thing, and, we're looking at universal targets, we're looking at, universal analysis, and a lot of these things are we don't have the infrastructure for, like, it is just not part and parcel of this town. It's not part and parcel of a lot of towns in Vermont. And I just,
So hold on a second, let's take a step back. So I feel like, Michael, you've expressed a number of times, you don't like the concept of equity being in the plan. You don't think it makes sense.
Well, I think it's a-
Hold on. It's in the standards. So either you address it or you can't get a plan that's certified. And that's a choice for the planning commission to make. I'm not judging it one way or the other, but that's just a requirement of the standards. Like, I could be against paying federal taxes, but if I don't want to deal with repercussions, like going to jail or having my assets seized, then I just have to pay my taxes. So, like, in terms of getting a certified enhanced energy plan, you just have to do an equity impact analysis. And I think getting lost in the details of the value of that are somewhat immaterial to this conversation, because it really comes down to two pathways. Either you do it in the way that fits the town best and is best for the town, and I completely agree with you, and that's my job, is to help write the plan in a way that is best for the town. And you have to meet the standards. It's not an option. Either you meet the standards and then you can get the plan certified, or if you fundamentally don't want to meet the standards, that's perfectly fine, but you can't get the plan certified. And so I think debating the value of the standards is not a good use of time. It's just choosing to meet them or choosing not to meet them. And that's really what the planning commission has to do.
I think the broader conversation that I'm having with you right now is, towns did not have the ability to, we are not given an ability to have a conversation. It is either do what the state is mandating or you don't get certified. And
Yep.
and I think that is a really horrible way to try to help govern towns. That's just, I mean,
It's not about helping, it's about control.
it's about, yeah, exactly. And,
Once
we
again,
had,
I don't make the rules. I'm not a state employee. I have nothing to do with those standards. So, like, once again, I can't influence that at all. I can help you meet the standards, but I cannot change the standards. And so we could spend the next hour debating state control versus local control. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If you want to have an enhanced energy plan, you just have to meet the standards. And you can do that in the way that's best for the town. And that's what
we can drop the
advocate
enhanced
for.
energy plan, and we
And
can
will
just,
that change so we don't need to put in certain things if we drop that?
I believe so.
so why don't we just get rid of them?
Well, I think a question, this is Gail Fowler. I think maybe a question, Jeremy, is that does the town have to accept the standards as it is, or can we fit them to Timoth goals?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. You have, it's both. You have to accept the standards as they're written. So like you need to have a policy and action related to reducing single occupancy vehicle use. So that's not an option to just say, we're not going to do that. Your option is to say, okay, how do we do this in a way that makes sense for Tinmouth? And that's really what my job is, to help you think through, okay, here's the standard of decreasing single occupancy vehicle trips. How can Tinmouth do that? Like, what works for Tinmouth? What's going to benefit the residents of Tinmouth? And I'm 100% in agreement with what everyone's saying, that this plan should benefit Tinmouth and benefit the residents of Tinmouth and be written in a way that makes sense for Tinmouth. And out of the, I can't remember how many it is, 14 standards or so, you don't have the option to pick and choose which standards you're meeting. You have to meet all the standards. The template that I provided you, you don't have to use that exact language. There's certain things where, sure, you can change the language, but you do need specific numbers in there. Without getting lost in the details of the numbers, you have to have, you have to evaluate current energy use. And so that's, you don't have a choice to not do that. Or another one is with renewable targets. You have to have renewable targets in terms of how much renewable generation the town is willing to host to meet their part of the regional average. How you do that is up to the town, but you still have to do that. And so I don't, do you all understand that balance of, my job is basically helping you thread that needle of, okay, here's all the things we can't change, and here's all the standards that are out of all of our control, including me. And how do we fit in the things that make sense for the town into that framework?
I think, Jeremy, part of that, what you just said, when you're talking about, how do you decrease, single vehicle like driving, like you don't, like there are certain areas in, Vermont, New England, Tinmouth, where, single passenger, like that should not be a goal of a town or a state. I mean, and I know that has no control, but when we get to, a rural area where you are going to have to travel and you're going to travel by yourself, it's not just making a policy is, that's bad planning if we're just going to, copy and paste something because the state wants us to. Like that's like, this is a document that goes down in history, and it's bad governance. I mean, it's just flat out bad governance to just like boilerplate whatever the state tells us that we have to do. What we have to try to mandate this. We need to make a
Hold
sign
on.
that says.
But once again,
but-
it's somewhat immaterial. Like I'm not here to debate the standards. It's not of value to any of us. It's not a good use of any of our time. I have no control of the standards. They exist. It sounds like you just don't want to meet the standards, which then leads you down the road of just not having an enhanced energy plan.
Well, what I'm getting at is if the standards make absolutely no sense whatsoever for this town, and if we're just going to write something, like that's a bad standard. It's bad governance. It's bad policy. And like what I got hackled up for, several years ago was the numbers, and the numbers were the ones that like we were looking at it and we were like, we don't believe these numbers. And so, again, like if we're going to put numbers into our town plan, like we have to believe that these are actually the numbers that represent the energy usage of this town. Correct? Because if we're not going to use accurate numbers, then why have an energy plan at all? If we're just, I mean, that's what I'm getting at, is that if it has to make sense and it has to be factual. Otherwise, just writing a grand idea for that the state wants us to, to put to paper, like that's not good enough for the town of Tinmouth. Like we need to be doing better. The state needs to be doing better, and I know you don't want to go down this road, but this is like when you're if you're pretending information is factual and it isn't, like, to me, that's a problem. Like that is a huge problem.
What are the repercussions if we go forward with this plan and are unable to meet it? Has the state decided that yet?
So that's actually another good point I wanted to clarify from what I saw at your meeting, your last meeting. This isn't a mandate. This is an option. You don't have to do this. Like, this is just totally up to the town to do. It is also not mandating anyone else do anything in your town. The point of the plan is to try to move the needle on cutting air pollution and energy use through this plan, through demonstrating by example for the town, and making the things you outline, the policies and actions you outline in the plan, easier for people in town to adopt. Nothing has anything to do with mandates, requirements, creating rules in the town. This is all more along the idea of how do you encourage moving things from one place to another. And so, trying to think of a good example. So within the regional plan that we're writing right now, I'm writing the energy chapter of the regional plan, and I'm writing that the RRPC will lead by example by doing the things suggested in the plan. And so one example would be our office, our physical office space, getting that weatherized, trying to save energy in the ways that make sense to us and are feasible and reasonable, and then are examples that other people can follow. And one example, I had an energy walkthrough with Efficiency Vermont and talked with the building supervisor and thought we didn't have programmable thermostats. I was going to suggest we get them. It turns out they were just, you had to like pull them off the wall, and there's a QR code on the back, and you had to scan that and then download an app and use that to program the thermostats. And it was like this whole rigmarole. What happened, I programmed the thermostats, and then after 1 month of our bill dropped by roughly 45% just from programming the thermostats. And so that is the kind of thing that this plan would be trying to advocate for, saying, hey, here's a thing that could help other people. And here's ways we're letting people in town know how they can be helped. And so that could be, a lot of it you'll see is educating people, holding workshops, things of that nature. It is not the idea of, like, some of the most extreme ideas I've heard from people related to EEPs. I don't mean in the Tinmouth Planning Commission, I mean just all over the region. Whenever I've talked to anyone about EEPs, some people think that it's an excuse for the state to use eminent domain to take land, to build solar and wind, and like, there's nothing like that whatsoever. This is more just trying to encourage people to do things. It is not punishing people for not doing things. And so I think it's really important to recognize that this is all a plan about encouragement and providing support to people to make it easier to do the things that are listed in the plan. It is not everyone needs to buy an electric car by 2025, or I don't know, you're getting kicked out of town.
What did I miss? What did I miss?
Not much.
Well, in this
How can we
plan,
define, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
how can we define advocate versus mandate? Can we do that line?
Yeah, I mean, if you look through the plan, you're not gonna find the word mandate anywhere.
Well,
Is it not? Is
it
it
is a
not
mandated,
a mandate?
Oh, I'm sorry, I heard someone speaking in the background, but they didn't come through the microphone. What was the question?
Why are they everywhere choosing Sonobel, the advanced solution for permanent bat removal?
Isn't this whole thing a mandate?
No,
How can we define that in a way that people understand that it is not a mandate? It's to advocate.
yeah, I mean, we can put that in the plan somewhere. That's a totally great idea.
Well,
That
isn't it
seems to be
policy kind of a
a
mandate?
a reasonable thing to do.
We can classify it as a headline.
I would say that that is a mandate. If we want to have an enhanced energy plan, we are mandated to follow, you know, these things that do not fit with Tinmouth. You know, that is the mandate, you know, we don't get the theoretical, like,
Aren't policies kind of mandates?
well, we don't get, I mean, the whole point of having that, the whole reason we went into getting this in the last town plan was so that if a energy developer came to town, the town of Tinmouth would have some conversation with, you know, the energy board. That is the reason why Tinmouth did it in the first place. You know, if we don't have that, and if that no longer exists, if it doesn't mean anything, you know, what is in fact the benefit of having an enhanced energy plan? You know, if we don't get a say at the
Yeah.
table, if the town doesn't
That's-
get one, then all of this does is that we're agreeing to, you know, a mandate that the state has set forth that does or does not necessarily like benefit.
So,
And
Michael,
I
I think you're confusing some details. You made a couple statements there that I think are factually incorrect. So if you have an enhanced energy plan, then that gives the town substantial deference in a section 248 PUC siting proceeding. And so historically, towns before there were enhanced energy plans, they had due consideration. And due consideration was tried in the courts. There was a citing proceeding that was approved in spite of the town's plan that went to the Vermont Supreme Court, and they sided with the PUC. And through that, there was this. So then enhanced energy plan showed up to provide this thing called substantial deference. And so substantial deference is a higher level of legal weight for the town to, when if the town's intervening on a citing proceeding. And so if someone's trying to develop an energy project in town and the town has an enhanced energy plan, then you would have substantial deference. If you do not have an enhanced energy plan and someone's developing an energy, doing an energy development in town that the town is intervening on legally, you would have due consideration, which has been shown to not provide much, if any, legal weight. And so the substantial deference is providing you more legal weight, and the Public Utility Commission is supposed to review. If you have an enhanced energy plan, the Public Utility Commission has to review the citing proceeding and your opinions with greater legal weight than if you don't have one.
Is that the case even if we're not specifically following the details that are in the plan? That even the town is not able to, you know, do some of the things that are in here, but if we have the plan, but we haven't been following it to the T, we would still get the
Substantial
protection?
deference. Yep. Yeah. And I think it's a balance though. If you make up a plan and then it's clearly just a fallacy, like you're going out of your way to do things in opposition to your own plan, I think the PUC is going to see that and be like, well, I don't know about this. It says you're gonna lead by example by weatherizing your municipal building. And in fact, you removed all the windows and you just turn up your like oil. They're not gonna look at details like that, but just as a ridiculous example, I don't think you can use this as like a way to fleece the Public Utility Commission and just make a plan that's completely factually incorrect and you have absolutely no intention of moving forward with. That's the extreme like side of that. I think more what you're saying, and more realistically, if you're making a genuine effort and you made a plan to genuinely fit the town, yeah, you're gonna have that legal protection that way. I think it would have to be a pretty extreme example for you not to have that legal protection. And part of the proceedings, they're actually not allowed to review whether your plan should have been certified or not. They're only allowed to review whether or not you have a certified enhanced energy plan. And I think the idea is there's a number of steps, like you don't self-certify. And so there's a number of the Regional Planning Commission has to certify your plan. And so it needs to be a good faith effort and realistic and not, I don't know. It has to be in the other key piece, it has to be in line with the regional enhanced energy plan. You can't have something in complete opposition to the regional enhanced energy plan.
No, I think that there's a good faith energy going into this to try and make this work. So and it wouldn't be like a crazy example like you put out there, but just that if we were not able to actually follow to the T the things that are in there, that we wouldn't have, find ourselves in some kind of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, and I think this is one of the worst parts of these plans, that there's not actually a whole lot of progress tracking that's required in the plan. I am encouraging towns, I think it's crucial to try to track your progress and not just say, if you look at some of the earlier enhanced energy plans, it's like 1,000,005 policies and actions of all these things that are going to happen. And then probably none of them ever happened in a lot of towns because there's no requirement to track your progress or even make progress on the things. So I think to like balance what you were saying, Michael, about good planning, I think it's valuable to the town to track its progress and to set policies and actions that are useful and valuable to the town. And like, just to take a step back and not get lost in the weeds here, I view these plans as a way to actually help a lot of people in town. So like, if you're focusing on helping people weatherize their houses, they're going to save a bunch of money. Like, it's never going to hurt anybody to weatherize their house. Those are the kinds of things in here. I randomly have some policies open, and this goes back to that mandate. So the policies that are in here are provide renewable generation siting guidance. That's not telling anyone to do anything per se. If anything, the siting guidance would actually be telling developers what to do. It's not telling residents what to do. And then you could put a screening policy into your electricity policies, like an aesthetic screening of energy development. That's one of the things the Public Utility Commission reviews in Section 248 proceedings. Maximizing the potential for renewable generation on preferred locations is another one. I'll go up to some of the other, let's see. I'm not reading all of them, just skimming through them, but transportation policy, decrease single occupancy vehicle trips through public transportation, walking and biking. Develop public transportation, shared transportation networks. Maintain existing and develop new walking and biking infrastructure. And to go back to the idea of template, the plan I sent you had all the policies and actions any town might have. Those were not specific to Tinmouth. So some of the things I just said to you don't make sense for Tinmouth, but I read them more so you could get the feel for them, that they are not every citizen will buy an electric car by 2028. It's not that kind of mandate that I think you're concerned with. A lot of it is, maintaining things that you already have and then increasing things that could benefit people. So public transportation. And actually another town, a more rural town, one thing they wanted to do for one of their decreasing single occupancy vehicle trips was try to organize group food deliveries. So like you can get your like grocery store to go orders, and they were thinking it might be useful, especially there's a lot of I think elderly people in their community, to organize this like shared grocery delivery, which would decrease a lot of trips. It would also increase capacity for people to have access to the groceries that can't drive. And so I'm not saying you should do that policy, but that was one way another town was thinking about, oh, okay, this is a way we could decrease the single driver car trips in a way that's benefiting the town with all these other things and things they'd already been thinking about before. So there's some
Can I ask?
examples. Yeah.
May I ask another question?
Yeah,
Like, we were just talking about the different policies, and one of the actions, it says required future development to include the cost borne by the developer of needed infrastructure, sidewalks, streetlights, etc. So since we don't have sidewalks, could we change that language to something along the lines of more efficient appliances or, so.
yeah, in terms of viewing this as a template, the policies I pulled from the standards. So the policies, there's not a lot of flexibility in. It's the actions that you make fit to your town. So that specific action, the town created that completely on their own. I had nothing to do with that. That was all their own idea. And what they were thinking, so it's like a town with a downtown that has sidewalks and people can walk all around. And they were concerned that someone would come in to develop housing, like a housing complex, and then all the taxpayers in the town would be on the hook for paying for the sewer and sidewalk upgrades so that the developer would have a more saleable project. So they were thinking, okay, make the developers pay for the extra infrastructure for the projects that they're developing.
So
So-
we could do that too. We could change the language, since we don't have sidewalks here, to enhance our energy goals, but change the language on these individual details.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and so all the actions, you could throw out every action in here and just come up with completely new actions.
Okay.
These were here really just to get you to have to give you something to think about.
That's great.
Rather than
Thank you.
giving you a blank page and saying, create some actions.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
And we do need to remember that this is a plan for like the next 8 years, what we anticipate might be happening. Is that correct?
Yeah, so these plans have to get, they expire after 8 years. They don't have to be, they're not like a town plan, which is, I guess arguably a town plan isn't required to be renewed, but there's all the like negative impacts of not doing that. An enhanced energy plan, even less, like you could just have an energy chapter and not have an enhanced energy plan. There's no, these are completely voluntary plans. They do expire after 8 years. So most towns, once they have one, they tend to update them every 8 years. There's not as many towns who are getting rid of them after they have them.
So did you get a chance to look at what was in our town plan before we added the EEP in 2020?
I did not know. You mean the non-energy stuff?
We had an energy section in our previous town plan.
Yeah, I did look at that. I thought you meant the whole town plan. Right?
No, and then we replaced that energy section with the EEP. When we were talking with Ed Bolt, when we started working on the town plan, he suggested that maybe we should just go back to that instead of doing all this EEP stuff, and I didn't know if you had a take on that.
I mean, it's up to you. It's really what the town thinks, whether they want to have the legal protection of an EEP or not.
Now, didn't the legislators pass another bill last year that kind of nullified any benefits towns would have for going forward in court proceedings? Didn't they give undue deference to development over town plans?
I'm not sure. I'd have to know what act you are talking about. I'm unaware of anything like that for energy planning.
Okay.
So can we get back to the big picture? This is Gail again, the big picture of how you see us creating this EEP. I mean, we've got down into the weeds a little bit here, and I just didn't know if that's, the overall picture. Is it gonna take 2 months? Do we go back to what you originally gave us and you sit down with us and we say, we wanna take out this, and you say, yes, you can, and or you can't, or, if we were gonna go forward with this, what's the plan?
Yeah, to move forward with it. So first you have to decide, do you want to move forward with it or not? I feel like I've heard enough differing opinions on that I would need a very clear, yes, we're definitely doing this, or no, we're definitely not doing this. So let's assume you decide, yes, we're definitely doing this. Then I would suggest we make a work plan. And so within that work plan, I would suggest breaking the plan up into sections and then working on them 1 or 2 sections at a time. There are currently basically 7 sections to the plan. So that would be ideally 7 working sessions. I think that it would be unrealistic to do that once a month at your meetings. The plan would have to be completed 75 days before July 1st is when the town plan expires of 2025. And so what I would propose is creating a working group that works on the plan outside of the planning commission meetings and then takes the work to the planning commission to go over it so that you have the official conversation of it at the public meeting. I also, from a time perspective, I can't commit to being at every meeting for the next 8 months or so, which is a longer time frame than you really even have. So that's what I would propose. We break it down into sections, work on probably 1 section at a time, get it to where it seems really good, and then bring it to the planning commission, and then revise that, I think, through email and email communication, and then work on each section at an actual meeting, but then the revisions would be in between meetings and not planning commission meetings. I think we need to meet more regularly than that and have a working group that would be able to do that. In terms of the bigger concept of working through the plan, what would be most effective and needed is for the town, for all of you on the planning commission, to say, hey, this is what we want. So the last meeting that you held that I watched kind of ended with, oh, we don't like this plan, scratch this, and Jeremy should just start over. That's not going to work. I can't guess what you want. I can't just be told, no, we don't like this, try it again. I need to know specifically what you do want, not just a list of what you don't want. So I need something to move forward with in order for it to be really fitting the town of Tinmouth and all the people in Tinmouth.
So I'm not in favor of going for the enhanced energy plan. I think the energy plan that we had before, I think we can revisit that and we can put in some numbers and do some, what Jeremy just proposed is a tremendous amount of work for a very negligible benefit to the town.
What is the benefit to the town, though? I mean, it seems like there is a benefit, and that might be very beneficial if anybody challenged us, but if it's not a big deal, I mean, that's what I'm just asking.
So in theory, it would be, we would have, you know, if a energy developer came to town and wanted to do something and the town of Tinmouth opposed it, in theory, we would have, you know, the ability to not be part of the conversation, but at least have the,
But you would be you could intervene, you could be an intervening party, so you would sit in on the proceeding.
we would be on the sidelines. We wouldn't really, I mean, the judge would be able to look and he would read what we had and, you know, whether he went along with it or not, it's still.
That's
entirely
actually
his
factually
discretion.
incorrect, Michael. So the town, if you were to try to intervene in a proceeding, most likely, I'm assuming you would hire a lawyer. You wouldn't have one of you doing it unless one of you is a trained lawyer. So your lawyer would be there, basically speaking for you and participating in the proceeding. It would not be on the sidelines. Like being an intervening party is a very specific legal term of art. And that means you're allowed to be in the proceeding and making statements and arguments.
Right, but we don't have the same level of standing as, you know, the developer or the state.
That's not true. So standing is just the ability to be an intervening party. So there's not more or less standing, and that's kind of the minutia of the legal terms. I think you're making the assumption that nobody would give the town as much credence in that proceeding as a developer or I'm not sure what you mean by the state, but I'll fill in the Public Utility Commission because they make the ultimate decision as the body of the state. There's also the Public Service Department that represents the citizens of the state who would be at a proceeding like that.
And that's, in a nutshell, that is it right there, is that, you know, the ultimate decisions are out of the town's hands. You know, it is in, you know, whatever, if the state or, you know, decides what is in the best interest of the state, the towns do not, whether we have a seat at the table or not, you know, ultimately, we are not, you know, we don't have the authority. We are not granted any more authority if we do an enhanced energy plan or if we don't.
Well, you are. The enhanced energy plan provides more authority to your opinion to direct energy development in your town.
Can we contact like somebody who represents us in the State House and ask what the changes were to the Act 250 that affect?
Sure. Yeah.
Wouldn't that make more sense than us trying to debate this?
We could talk to some representatives on Sunday. I can bring up some
I
questions.
think that's what we should do before we decide to do anything, because we really don't know. We have to go to the source. And then find out how much changed in the last
Yeah,
Well,
State House.
Act 250 is separate from Act 248
Right.
or Section 248.
Right,
They're
but-
two different
good.
regulatory streams that have.
No,
to
I
happen.
understand that.
That's a perfect point, Gail. When you ask, it's actually specifically anything held to Act 248 is specifically excluded from Act 250. So you don't want to be asking about Act 250 in relation to this. You want to make sure you're asking about, it's called a Section 248 proceeding. And the Public Service Department, they are the representatives on these proceedings for the citizens of the state. So that would be a good place to reach out to, is the public advocate at the Public Service Department. But definitely, Gail had a really good point. Be very clear that you're discussing and asking about a Section 248 proceeding, not Act 250. Because the answers are very different otherwise.
let's do a little digging in and investigation, and then maybe we'll make a decision at the next meeting.
Yeah, because it's, it's a lot of work, but we did put a lot of work to get it on the previous plan, and you don't want to just throw it away, but if it's not gonna benefit us to go through the extra work, it doesn't pay to.
No, it doesn't.
Might
There's
go
a,
back to go.
it's
to
a
the
lot
old-
of extra work
Right.
to do something that,
May
you
or
know,
may not benefit us.
yeah.
I think that's where you should go.
Yep.
Because we're debating things that we really don't know what was changed and how much it affects.
And we should find that out.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
can I-
find that out and then we can make a better decision.
Can I ask Jeremy another question?
Yeah.
The EEP plan that we did in 2020, how much does that need to be tweaked to bring it into compliance with the current standards?
You would have to change all the data and you would have to do an equity impact analysis. And the older EEPs, I felt like were much longer. And so
We
I've been
thought 30
trying-
pages is way too long.
What's that?
That 30 pages added to our town plan was way too long.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I've been trying to get them down. I think the draft I gave you was 10 pages, maybe.
13.
13, sure.
It's 13 pages.
Yeah.
So I've been really working hard. Actually, out of those 13 pages, there's an entire page of references. So there would be some maps involved too, which would take up more pages. But in terms of actual writing, yeah, 13 pages. I think there's spots we could maybe make it a little shorter. But my focus has been make the plans readable, make them so anybody can understand them who's in town, and make them short. Like, don't put in all the unnecessary details. And I feel like the older plans had, what they tended to do is they put there's two scenarios that get modeled with the data of the projections, where there's the baseline scenario, like if we don't make any changes, here's what all of our numbers will be. And then there's the climate action plan scenario, where if we follow the climate action plan, these are what all the numbers are. So I just got rid of all the baseline numbers because I felt like if our targets are all for like getting somewhere, why write where we're trying not to be? Because I think it just gets confusing and it'd be too much data, and you can cut a lot of what I'd call extraneous information out that way. And so
So
you could redo, that was a long-winded way of saying you could redo your 2020 plan. You'd have to update all the data, but you'll be updating twice as much data. I don't know that it would actually save you a whole lot of time. And then on top of that, you'll have to do an equity impact analysis. So at the end of the day, I don't imagine that's going to be less time.
So can we keep the maps that we did from 2020 that show where our preferences are and where our constricted properties are?
Yes and no. I would suggest putting those same preferred areas onto new maps. And there's fewer maps required now, so you only have to do solar and wind maps. Previously, you had to do hydro biomass maps.
Hydro and biomass.
But so there's updated mapping layers. I would say just use the new map layers, but use the areas that you chose already as your preferred sites. And that's something that the RPC would do.
As part of this plan.
Yeah, as part of this plan, you would just say, we could figure out where your preferred sites were from the last plan and then just transfer those over to more updated maps.
How are the
Why would
maps
they need
more
to be updated? It was 4 years ago.
4
They're
years ago,
they're
what's-
pretty,
What needs to be updated or what's out of date, I guess?
I don't know, I'd have to look at them more specifically. I'm not sure. And were those ones that Bob had done?
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure we don't have the layers for those. I don't know what he put in them, to be honest, so I couldn't tell you, I couldn't verify whether they match the current. There's a bunch of stuff that's taken out. So you have I'll use solar as an example. You'd have your solar map, and that is going to show just raw solar potential, like through LiDAR. There's like satellite images of areas, and then it calculates, okay, how much like southern exposure do you get, and like how much potential is there to make solar power in this spot. So that's the like first layer. And then you start removing pieces of that based off constraints. And so there's a series of different constraints like wetlands and
We've done that.
various protected habitats. Yeah.
Yeah, we have that map. Yeah.
That map is there.
Right, yep. What I couldn't tell you is whether that maps restraints, known constraints and possible constraints match the ones that we have access to. It's basically the same thing.
Okay, well, why don't we stick a pin in this for tonight? We've used up plenty of Jeremy's time and it's probably a good time to you know, get a little more information and, you know, maybe next week we can, I was actually thinking about unless anyone has any objection, maybe we can continue reviewing the draft town plan next meeting. And we can get a little information on the legal parameters of Act 248. And where
Make
that
sure you
would
say section 248.
Section 248.
It's funny, so Act 248 is super confusing. I know they're all almost the same, but I believe Act 248 is like a mental health law, and so it's an actual law. So if you don't say section 248, there's all kinds of things that can get confused with, and you'll get all kinds of even more confusing information because you'll think they're talking about energy rules and it's about mental health and yeah. So just be super clear, section 248.
Section 248.
Yeah.
I think we were sent something last year from the regional commission that defined the changes in section 248. Or the changes in the standards. I think Barbara sent something to the planning commission.
Yeah, so those are the standards. Just to live one less layer to this. The thing Barbara sent you, that was an update to the Enhanced Energy Plan standards, which are not section 248. That's just the rules related to installing new energy generation. And so the standards we're talking about here are the standards for enhanced energy plans, which is Act 174. And then
That's what she sent us was Act
Yeah.
174. Yes.
exactly. And so in terms of changes, I'm not aware of any recent changes to section 248. I think that's the same as it's been for a while now. But I'm just trying to be clear so you guys know what to ask, so you're not getting the wrong information from people.
No, thank you.
Yeah, and if you need, email me. I can reply with any answers to weeding any of this out that you need help with figuring out. If you aren't sure what you want to ask, just email me and I can help you formulate how to ask what you want to ask in a way that has all the right rules and numbers and things in it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And
Yeah.
in relation to working groups, because we're a 9-member planning commission, we can have groups of 4 working, but if you have 5, it's have to warn a planning commission meeting.
I'm not
Just so
necessarily,
you're aware.
yeah, and I'm not necessarily sold on working groups. I don't think that there's, anyway, let's not get into that.
Yeah.
I'll stay out of the minutia. Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you,
Have a good
Jerry.
night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Unless I mean, I'm not really interested in going through reviewing the next 10 pages. Is anyone else interested in reviewing the next 10 pages? Okay,
So how do you want to proceed with whether or not you want to go through with the EEP?
I'll gather a little bit of information, and present it to the board next meeting. And we will see what the board wants to do. Because it is a tremendous amount of more work to do. And we really do need to, have a discussion about what is the benefit of,
Right, what's the likelihood?
what's the
of
likelihood of someone
of a
building?
Energy project coming to Tiverton?
Exactly.
Three-phase,
I
we don't
say,
have three-phase line.
We don't have 3-phase.
that's what I was gonna say, we always say we don't have 3-phase up here, I mean, yes, you've got the marble line there, but will they let you tap into it, and I think it was Judy said at one point in time that we wanna make sure that what we do in town benefits the town. Well, if you tap into that, it's not gonna benefit the town.
You know, it's a tremendous, for me, it's a tremendous amount of energy to do something and to adhere to new rules and regulations, whether, you know, they don't mean a hill of beans to everyday people that live here, but it is a document that we're taking and that we're making, and I have serious reservations about the existence of equity in absolutely every statement that we have. I think
Well,
that,
I think Bob Lloyd suggested using fairness as a better term.
well, Bob
you know.
suggested taking the entire, you know, that whole section right out. I mean, he read it and he was, you know,
He said the word
Yeah.
equity was in there too many times.
It's-
I mean, so you can have it a couple of times, but is there a way to express
Well,
what
and
we see as equity?
And what
without
is-
the fact
actually saying
that they have no good definition of what they mean by equity.
well, they have multiple definitions of what is
Well,
equity, what,
exactly.
you know, and when you go through and you read, because there are different, you know, there is like,
There's 4 different ones.
yeah,
in there.
and they all mean slightly different things, and
It's fair, one of the things he recommended to read, Jeremy recommended, I went online and I read it, and it was very ambiguous, because they're not. In one of the sections he said to read, it was so ambiguous, you didn't know what they were talking about, and it's kind of hard to accept something like that.
if we have a definition, or if we made our own definition
Yeah.
of equity, and, you know,
Well, I think if we have to keep the enhanced energy plan, I think, you know, we could just go with what he's outlined perhaps, and then, you
Yeah.
know, add in things that we're saying that, you know, we are following the state's rules, but we do have reservations. You know, if we want to keep it, you know, saying, well, you know, we're doing what we have to do, but we don't always believe it, you know, or accept it for what's written.
I mean,
But
you know,
you can't just, you know, accept what they write, but you don't really have much choice when it comes to.
Uncle Pat has a good one.
oh, yes, Pat.
Yes, Pat.
You're muted.
Gotta unmute, Pat.
Okay, and I remember one of the suggestions would be that we can modify the terminology so that it's less offensive in the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. The thing is that Jeremy was saying that certain language absolutely had to be in there. So maybe we could get him to highlight what absolutely has to be in here. And then we can make changes, like you say, to the way we want it to be.
Try to streamline it.
Yeah, streamline it, or just, if we absolutely legally have to use certain language, so he needs to tell us what that is, so
Well,
that we can.
so
go
he-
about the
he did.
changes. Yeah.
You know, it's all of the policies. So like policy under universal targets, universal policies, distribute the benefits of this plan equitably.
This year.
Yeah,
But he was saying, when I specifically asked him about that we can change that.
You can
No,
change the
you can change
actions.
the actions, but
You
the
can change
policies,
actions, but not.
But
but you have to
policies.
keep the
Okay.
policies, and that's where, you know, distributional equity. Like, that's the definition that we need to know what that
What that
definition
means.
is,
Yeah.
because like, that's the minutia, that's the important part of a document, because if we don't know, we're putting terms or terminologies that we don't understand.
I don't see the responsibility. Why is the responsibility of the town? You know, in those situations, it doesn't make any sense for a town to be responsible for things that the state legislates without, you know, some kind of, you know, more definition or more, you know, something that explains it more.
Well, it may be that the plan is supposed to encourage people, but you know, the town has no authority to make anybody weatherize their homes or do
Yet.
any particular steps. It's
I
just.
mean,
They-
it did say, and he said they were trying to do it too, that they're gonna try to lead by example. And in there, they had somewhere that, you know, lead by example.
Right. But we've already done that. We've weatherized all of our buildings, so
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? What else can the town do, you know?
Buy electric dump trucks.
No, you don't. Oh, you stop that right now.
No,
Electric vehicles are.
Yeah, let me,
we'll never get
you-
plowed out.
you research some big electric
Oh, I already
trucks
know.
and see how effective they are in cold weather.
Oh, I already know.
If we go with this plan, I think we need to add at least our definitions into this plan of what distributional equity is and procedural equity, so at least we know what we're talking about, and people reading the plan after us know what we're talking about. So it's not,
Equity means a lot of different things to a lot of
Yeah.
people.
yeah, but if.
And
we-
the one
we-
that reads it, their definition is one way they think it is.
If you define
But
it
if
in
we
the
def-
plan,
Yeah,
that what you are saying, it means
Exactly.
in the plan, then
Mhm.
then they can't get it messed up.
So maybe what we need to do is try to define one of those things and ask Jeremy, this is how we define it, is this gonna pass muster? And if it does, fine, and if it doesn't, then that's our answer and where we're gonna go.
Well, but if we
Yeah.
define something and he says, no, that's not the definition, and then,
Then we say,
but if we ask him what the definition is and he doesn't give it to us,
we'll have to come up with a definition.
Okay.
If it
I
doesn't
think
meet-
fairness is
I-
a pretty powerful word.
Yep.
But are they really meaning fairness when they say equity? That's what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
is that
I know.
fairness could be something else, equity, and something could be fair, but it's not equitable, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, right.
or it just depends on your lens too. I mean, you might think it's fair and I might think it's very unfair, just
Right.
coming from a different experience.
depends on who's receiving and who's taking.
Whose ox is getting gored.
Yeah, well, no, that's, and that is a very real conversation that, towns need to be having, the state needs to be having. And if we have to start having it now, we need to start having a dialogue, and, if it starts here and Jeremy doesn't want to hear it, but he will be listening to, oh, people are concerned about the term equity, or they are concerned that this or that, and, like, that's the pendulum that will shift things away from, the maniacal fist of government oppressing, little itty bitty towns, like, we should be more self-governing. It's,
Well, and
Ideally.
speaking of little itty bitty towns, if we did have a big developer come here, does the town even have the funds to hire a lawyer to fight this?
there's that.
We got $5,000 a year in our legal thing. Well, maybe
So-
that's it, the budget's
so we-
2,500, but-
We could just walk away from the enhanced energy plan just on the fact that we only have a $5,000 budget, and that's like, what, a weekend for a lawyer? I mean, that's-
Well,
You
what
know,
about
If we needed to hire somebody, the select board can go to voters and ask for more money.
Or the public service advocate, what he said to do,
The public
Well,
service
to ask
is not an
questions
advocate
to-
for us.
that wouldn't help us. but-
He said just to ask questions.
Just-
No,
Oh,
no, we,
Yeah.
we're really not,
We got lawyers in town?
it's much,
But
much.
depending on what law they're practicing, I mean,
Yeah,
they,
that's
they have different languages even amongst
That's true.
themselves.
That's
different.
true.
outcomes.
I think that's something to seriously consider, is like the logistics of the town ever going against a developer. That's even saying that someone doesn't come up with a concept or an idea that everyone likes. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at this from a negative aspect, but there is a possibility that someone could come up with an idea that, and
Would be good.
Yeah.
Problem is, you will never satisfy everybody.
no,
You never will.
no.
But you could have a big solar farm that's off where nobody's gonna see it, so, you might not.
Yeah.
We got the land, nobody could see.
I mean, I think solar does have its own limit. I mean, I think people are running into the fact that solar does have very real limitations in its ability to,
It's one solar company went, filed chapter 11, and they had a customer on television who was complaining that he had a problem and he can't get it fixed.
yeah,
And, one guy's pointing a finger at his parent company that supplies the parts that isn't giving him
That's
the
been
ability to fix it, so,
sold.
I mean, everything has its limitations, but I just think that, we should look at what section 248 is
yeah,
and see how much,
what benefits there actually
what-
are gonna be.
what would happen if something did come about. Because, when you're talking about 8 years and I've seen a lot of changes since I've been here, so.
Yeah.
You don't know what's coming down the road, so,
Yep. 8 years, we could all be eating dogs and cats.
yeah. We all live in Ohio.
They're
Learn
eating the
to
dogs,
live
they're
along.
eating the cats.
So you're gonna think about this and then try to make a decision at your next meeting?
I'll-
Whether to go
I'll-
forward or not.
Do some research. If anyone else is interested in noodling around, finding out some, the more
Yeah.
people that look at it and, hopefully we all end up at the same resource, but.
Well, I know he mentioned something at one of the earlier meetings, probably a few months ago, and when I looked at it and they talked about equity and the definition, they didn't really give you a definition, it just had a term. And the term was repeated and repeated and repeated, and there was no definition in what he had me look at or what I looked up. And that's kind of, that's the thing that's scary about it, because you're agreeing to a term that has no definition.
Yeah.
But I mean, they really don't have much of a choice. I mean, either you have a town plan with it in there or without it in there, it's either gets approved or not, they're not gonna
Well,
approve it without it.
No, they will. I mean, they'll approve it without an enhanced energy plan. We can just
Yeah.
have, we are, we have everything pretty much in a row, like, we're in good shape to just having it approved. This is,
Right, we can have an energy section, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
an
Right.
enhanced energy section.
and at this point, I'm in bigger favor of an energy section, but
Right.
I could be convinced otherwise, like, if we
Well,
find out
let's-
that there is
Let's
a
look at 248.
248 and see what, if it gives us actual teeth,
Yeah.
and if that's something that we think that we want, then we'll pursue.
So before you end, just a reminder that Bob has resigned, so you're gonna need another member. So if you can think of anybody that is interested in planning or put some feelers out, the select board would like to know before its October 10th meeting.
Okay, I
So
know,
he's resigned from for health reasons, from the planning commission and from the regional plan as being representative of the regional planning commission. So there's 2 vacancies.
Chris said on Writers Group Sunday, he was there,
Yeah.
at the hospital.
Yeah.
Doing the,
Yeah, the email that he sent last week said it was with regret, but he was in the hospital
Yeah.
again for
Yeah.
unknown medical things, so he just didn't think he should continue.
Yeah. he spoke about it.
Can I say something? Melody?
Melody,
So I did send to the select board and the select board assistant that Marshall is still very interested in both positions, and I did, Marshall sent through his iPad, to the Michael, the chair, that he's still interested in a spot on the planning commission.
yep, yeah, I got that email. I was about to mention that. I was also about to mention that there is some other interest in getting on the planning commission from some other members in town. They haven't quite decided whether they wanted to pursue it or not, but they might let us know in the next couple of days. So there might be more than one, person to think about.
We have, what is this, till October 10th?
Yeah.
Then Alan, he asked somebody,
Oh, okay, so there might be even more, so that, it might be that there might be a group of, that, and it might be that maybe we're not making any decision, we're not doing any actions right now. So we can, if there is 3 or 4 or 5 people that are interested, we could maybe do the same thing, have another meet and greet.
well, I think with Judy, we had her come to a couple of meetings, so she
Yeah.
got a flavor of
Yeah.
what actually
Well,
happened.
that's what I was thinking is, shouldn't the planning commission, like we did with the last one, say, hey, this is who we'd like to have on the board, to the select board?
meet them, have them come here
Yeah.
and, kind of go from there. I think
So
that's a
shouldn't they
good
come
idea.
to our next meeting? Can we delay?
Yeah, we can delay, it.
Yeah,
There's nothing, just because the select board wants someone by I mean, we don't have any zoning, there's nothing on the ballot for us to make decisions wise, so we're just, going through this, so it's not like, we need an odd
We can
number
give-
of people.
Give people in town a chance to think about it and.
Yeah.
Maybe come to a meeting,
Don't need to rush into things,
yeah. That's fine.
All right. Anything else?
So your next meeting is October 17th, I believe.
All right, I guess I'll adjourn the meeting. 8:19. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Hmm. 4 minutes later than last meeting.
4 minutes later.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I like to keep it to about an hour and a half.
That's not
We just classify the town plan as a fictional work. And that way. we Cover it.
So let me, stop.
That's actually not a bad idea.